Many of you watching this video will already know there's a high correlation between mental health issues and chronic pain. Research shows that both chronic pain and mental health issues exacerbate each other. People living with chronic pain also have a higher risk of suffering from anxiety, depression, and to abuse substances. As many of you will know, chronic pain also affects sleep, which has a range of knock-on effects to the way we feel mentally and physically. And on the flip side, pain is a common feature for people with anxiety, particularly people with generalised anxiety disorders. Anxiety is also common for people who suffer fibromyalgia, back problems, and migraines. What I'm here to talk about today is the way that our repetitive or unwanted thoughts contribute to our physical pain. An interesting thing about repetitive or unwanted thoughts, you might like to call them, is that we tend to have them in the area of our lives that we really care about. So people who experience TMS or even health anxiety are really likely to care a lot about their health. So the last thing they want is pain or sensations in their bodies that are uncomfortable. Therefore, people who have TMS or perhaps health anxiety most likely really care about their health. So when thoughts come up about their health or they get fixated on a pain or a sensation in their body, the brain will really cotton onto it because it feels so important and there's so much emotion behind the thoughts. So if somebody has pain or sensation and they keep thinking about it and keep checking their body, for example, the brain is much more likely to think, this is really important. I must keep bringing this thought back up. I must keep bringing this thought around and cycling it through the mind so this person doesn't forget or doesn't put themselves in danger. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how that mechanism works in our minds today. Another important thing to know about repetitive or unwanted thoughts is that they can tend to get stuck. What I like to say is stuck. So a thought that recycles many, many times is what I would consider stuck. The other thing about them is that if we resist them and we're having thoughts about some pain in our body or some sensations and we're trying to push them away and tell ourselves, we must not think about that. You're trying to push it away, try to resist. The mind's going to think then that this is a particularly important thought because there is emotion, there is energy being used trying to push that thought away. So the brain sort of goes, this must be really important. I'll keep it in place. I'm sure many of you will have the fairly common advice that's given about changing our thoughts or ignoring our thoughts or distracting ourselves. But again, as I said, it's that resistance sometimes that keeps these thoughts that we don't want in place. And what we can do is by not thinking about them, we actually increase the amount of thoughts we have about the particular situation that we're not happy about and we're trying to move on. So you may have heard this exercise before. It's a pretty common one. It's just to demonstrate that what we don't want to think about often persists. And so the exercise that I'll get you to have a little think about now is try not to think of a purple elephant. And just take a moment to do that. Try not to think of a purple elephant. And some of you may succeed for that amount of time. If you did it for longer though, you would probably find one of two things. Either you would think about the purple elephant, or you would try not to think about the purple elephant, which in turn is actually thinking about the purple elephant. So as you can see, when you're trying not to think about something, it is actually really hard. It's not something that our minds do because by not thinking about it, we're actually bringing it into our awareness even more than it would be otherwise. I think that Karen Lynn Cassidy explains this really well in her book, Freedom from Health Anxiety. What she says is, every time you check, you make it more likely that you'll feel driven to check again the next time you get a scary thought about illness. You also accidentally reinforce your mind developing a high alert system for noticing any potential signs of illness. Cassidy goes on to mention that the more you think about a frightening symptom or notice potential signs of illness, the more your anxiety increases because of the process of negative reinforcement. That quote obviously was from a book about health anxiety. And here today we're talking about sticky thoughts, and the focus of my work that I do with clients and my YouTube channel is TMS or mind body syndrome. But I do have to say that there are a lot of correlations that I see in myself and with my clients between mind body syndrome and health anxiety, and many of the strategies that are used to overcome each of these issues are similar. and also something that is similar with the vast majority of people who suffer from both, is that our thoughts are repetitive and that our mind is the key to healing both. Some people, rather than having repetitive or unwanted thoughts, have repetitive or unwanted sensations. And this may include things like urgency, needing to go to the toilet even if you've just recently been, feeling discomfort with your clothes, like maybe your underwear or the way your clothes feel on your body and being fixated on that. Other people may suffer from things like being able to hear their heartbeat while they're lying down to go to sleep, and that interrupts their sleep. And that focus and fixation again on the sensations can make them more pronounced. The good thing is we can use the same strategies for thoughts or sensations when we're dealing with these issues. So from a personal perspective, I certainly have had many unwanted and repetitive thoughts about my health. And I had a particular episode, it's quite a few years ago now, but it's probably the incident that put me on this track to now work with people who suffer from mind-body syndrome and also health anxiety, is that I experienced a little bit of numbness in the fingers of my left hand. It was very mild, so off I went to see we call him here in Australia, general practitioner, doctor, and he had a look and he sent me for tests to look at perhaps it being RSI, and that came back negative. But he had mentioned in the session that they do a number of tests on a range of things, and at the far end of the spectrum, we could be looking at something like multiple sclerosis. And I can tell you that really triggered me and pushed my buttons. So I learned all about what the symptoms were of MS. And all of a sudden I was thinking that I was experiencing blurred vision, tiredness, hotness in my body. And so, as I said, I had a number of tests. They all came back negative, which is positive, which was a good thing. They didn't find anything. And so off I went to have my MRI to see if I had MS. And I was so scared of having this MRI, I put it off, but eventually off I went to get it done. And it came back, nothing to see here. And I thought that I instantly would be okay with that instantly I would feel fine and I'd be reassured. But there was a bit of doubt in me. So whilst before the MRI I had these thoughts, I was constantly, what if I have MS, and my fingers numb, and is my vision blurry, etc. After the MRI, the thoughts became more like, what if they didn't get it right? So there was that doubt in me. But as you can see from the story, it was all about my thoughts and my fixations. The physical symptoms only started to go away once I realized what was happening with my thoughts. And I was lucky enough at the time to come across acceptance and commitment therapy, which really works for me. It really works well for my clients. The acronym for acceptance and commitment therapy is ACT, and I use ACT in a number of ways to help with my own thoughts. I use a number of those strategies to work with clients, and I find it works particularly well for people suffering from TMS, mind-body syndrome, and also health anxiety. So once I was able to realize that it was my thoughts driving my symptoms and my anxiety, firstly, as I applied these methods, my mind just became a more calm place because I was noticing what was happening. I was okay for them to be there, and I stopped resisting them. I stopped saying, don't think about your hands, don't think about your sight, don't think about your worry that maybe they got it wrong. I was kind of like, that's interesting. That's interesting. I'm thinking about my hands. I'm thinking about my sight. Oh, there you go. There's that thought again about maybe they got it wrong. So I was just lightening up my relationship with my thoughts. And as I did that, the symptoms just sort of floated away. The less I thought about them, the less I checked my body, and the less seriously I took the thoughts. They just didn't seem to need to come back anymore. And even if they did come back randomly sometimes, I just again go, oh, there you are again. Hello, it's okay for you to be here. And so really I just stopped resisting them. I think another important principle about thoughts, and I hear it over and over again about you just have to change your thoughts, and your thoughts are causing the issues in your life, and perhaps that's true. But the way it's often presented in the mainstream is that we have complete control over our thoughts and that we're responsible for the thoughts we have. However, particularly for people who tend towards a bit of a sticky mind and repetitive thoughts, sometimes the thoughts that pop into our head are just random and they don't mean anything about us. And even if we tried to control them, we couldn't, because as we've been speaking about today, the more we try and control our thoughts and make them wrong or make them go away, the more our mind will think they're important and bring them back to say, hey, did you need to have this thought again? We're just trying to keep you safe. Like, just bringing back this thought because you had an emotional reaction to it. So I think a really important principle of the work that I do with clients, and I think it's a really important understanding to have if we do suffer from TMS or health anxiety, is that thoughts can be really random. We don't need to control them. We have to come from a place of kindness and lightness and noticing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategies that I think are really helpful, that have been helpful for me and that have been helpful for my clients when it comes to dealing with these repetitive thoughts about our health. There's one more thing I did want to mention that's very important before I jump into the strategies actually, which the associations that our minds tend to make when we have TMS or health and anxiety. Often things like, if I eat that cheese or if I eat that gluten, dairy, etc., whatever it might be, that I'm going to have IBS. I'm going to have symptoms of bloating or whatever else it might be for that individual. Or it could be, if I do this physical activity, if I do this hike, or if I lift those weights, or if I bend too much, I'm going to have back pain, knee pain, etc. And I feel like they're the thoughts that we need to be focusing on too when we have TMS or health anxiety. We need to be really noticing those thoughts and those associations that we've made between the activities that we do and then the pain or sensations that we might have in our body. And noticing that sometimes when we're doing the thing like eating the cheese, we might already be looking into the future and thinking, I'm going to feel terrible later because I ate this cheese. And it's noticing those thoughts too. They're really important thoughts to notice. Of just like, there's the thought that I ate the cheese and I'm going to have a tummy ache later. Remembering it is a thought, and that thoughts, they're powerful. The thoughts actually can tell your body, oh, I think you're going to have a sore tummy, and then what do you know, we get the symptoms. So they're also really important thoughts to notice and observe and be aware of. So there's the thoughts and the fixations and the checking on your body and the sensations and thinking about the pain itself. There's also the associations that's important to notice thinking about. And I think it's also important to notice the thoughts about, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that thing because I feel like this, or I'll probably feel like this. I won't be able to sit on those chairs, or it'll be too much standing, etc. There's a lot of thoughts around our health, and they'll be different for everyone. Some people, it will be more about just the fixation on the body and the sensations. Other people, it'll be more about the associations, and other people, it'll be thinking about the future. So a range of thoughts that we may have that are contributing to our experience and also potentially making our chronic pain worse. So I'm just going to give you a couple of strategies that you might like to try today. The first one, and I've just spoken a little bit about it throughout the video today and just now, is about observing our thoughts. So it really is that noticing our thoughts about our health, about our pain, about our limitations potentially because of our pain or our condition. And to help observe your thoughts, you might like to put a sentence or some words in front of your thoughts. Like, I'm noticing the thought about X, or I'm having the thought about Y. So it's just reminding ourselves that they're thoughts, and there's another part of us that can observe those thoughts. And by doing that, it's a reminder that we're not our thoughts, because there's a part of us that can see ourselves thinking. And it just helps us to separate a little bit from our thoughts and say, our mind does pretty crazy things. Our mind does what it does. That's what minds do much of the time. But there's a part of us that can go, oh, I can see myself thinking that, and I don't have to take it too seriously. And in that is a lot of freedom. The second strategy that I really like, particularly when you've got a bunch of thoughts that are all about the same thing, is giving them a story. And I like to give them a name that's not too serious. So for me, with the example of cheese, it might be the cheesy queasy story, or it might be the crummy tummy story, or it might be the achy breaky story when we have a pain or we're really scared about hurting ourselves more than we're already hurting. So it's being able to say, oh, there's the story about, or, oh, hello, here's the story again about the crummy tummy. And it's just reminding ourselves that we do have a narrative in our mind, and it can be a bit of a story. And that's okay. It's okay to have stories. We have stories about all parts of our life. But again, it's just noticing that our mind has a really strong element in that. It's always talking to us and telling us stories. And again, we can buy into them or not. We can hold them lightly if we wish. And by labeling them as stories, it really does help us do that. Another strategy that I like, which is more of a mindset shift than an actual strategy, is seeing our thoughts with curiosity rather than fear. And again, it's like that, that's what my mind's doing right now. And rather than tensing up in fear or resistance, we kind of just let it be. Almost like clouds in the sky. We let them float by, knowing we don't have to take them too seriously. And perhaps they're just random thoughts and we can let them float through, just like clouds in the sky. I mentioned earlier also that some people have unwanted or repetitive sensations in their body that they resist and they really get fixated on. They do a lot of checking with. And the exercise that I prefer for that is somatic tracking. So you may be aware of somatic tracking, but if not, it's where we notice a sensation in our body. It could be a mild pain. It just could be an uncomfortable sensation. We notice it, we let it be, we're mindful of it, we're gentle with it. And the aim of the exercise is to bring safety into our body and into our mind. I've linked to a short, I think it's about 10-minute somatic tracking track that I've recorded if you'd like to try that out. But it's just a very gentle and a very lovely way to notice our sensations, feel safe, and just spend some time with our bodies in mindfulness. If you've enjoyed today's video and you'd like to hear more about how I work with clients one-on-one, face-to-face here in Melbourne or online, the link to my website and more information about how I work with clients is in the description. So thank you for listening today, and I hope to see you all again soon.